To the Lineman Live podcast. Sorry for the little bit of a late start this afternoon, but I had to get some few things finished before I got into my studio to get my podcast episode going. How's everybody doing out there? Hope everybody's having a wonderful Tuesday. It's the grind. It's just the grind. We just keep grinding. No problem with that. And speaking of grinding, let's take a look at these Cowboy fans. That's how they must be feeling right now with the Eagles and their comeback win yesterday against the New York Giants. I'll tell you what, I gave up on that game at halftime. Didn't realize that the Eagles had anything to really give. I mean, these guys were getting pummeled. I mean, they just, Carson Wentz just doesn't really have anybody to toss the ball to outside of his tight end. But, it was a weird game. They come back, they win the game in overtime, and Cowboys fans everywhere go freaking nuts, But the playoff picture is clearer than ever. Well, as clear as you could expect. With Baltimore Ravens still at the top of the pack, followed by San Francisco 49ers, Kansas City Chiefs, Seattle Seahawks, and New Orleans Saints. As far as the teams that are sitting pretty in the playoff picture. But, again, the NFL season, December is the month where the checks are cashed. That's the month where teams have to put up or shut up because seeding, division championships, all those things are on the line. Now, me personally, had a couple times when we were playing for something important at the end of the season in Jacksonville. I know that seems like a long time ago, and believe me, it was. I'm talking back in 2010, 2011. Well, no, not 2011, 2008, no, 2009, 2010. Years where we were playing to get into the playoffs at the end of the season. For whatever reason, didn't get it done. But then we had those seasons where things just were looking really ugly, kind of like what's happening right now in Jacksonville. After they took that shellacking to the Los Angeles Chargers, I mean, where does the bottom, where does it stop? Where's the fallout stop? Reminds me specifically of the 2011-2012 season in Jacksonville when we had Mike Mularkey as our head coach. Mike Mularkey is the worst head coach that I've ever had the displeasure of being coached by. I mean, this guy ruined an entire franchise in one season. We were making a little bit of a rebound. They hired Mike Mularkey in Jacksonville thinking that this guy was the answer. Also, we had an absolutely god-awful general manager in Gene Smith. And both of them were fired at the end of that season. But it's funny. When you're not playing for a playoff position, a lot of people ask me, so, what's it like, to go out there and have to play for nothing? Like, do you guys just pack it in? Well, you don't necessarily pack it in, but there is a certain level of sacrifice that you're willing to make during a football game. And based on how your team is doing during a season, that level of sacrifice changes and varies. And I would say that there's no better example of this than when you look at teams like Miami, you look at teams like the Jaguars And, you're going to compete, of course. There's not going to be any letdown in competing. But at the same time, I'm not about to hurt myself or injure myself for pride. That's not going to happen. I'm not going that extra mile just to impress a coach, especially if you're a guy who has a contract extension, especially if you're a guy who has some clout amongst the pecking order of the team. But definitely not going to just sit there and bang my head against the wall to try and, impress coaches when it comes to some of the extracurriculars that happen on the field. Case in point, I'll never forget. This was that year with Mike Mularkey. Mike Mularkey, oh man, what can I say about this guy? This guy wore down an entire football team of players within 4 to 5 weeks of the football season starting. Guys were walking around with that look in their eyes. They just didn't have any energy left. And we were only in week 5. We're getting ready to play the New York Jets. And I'm sitting in my locker after warm-ups, and, these warm-ups, it was weird, man. It was really weird. I don't think I'd ever felt that way in my entire life as a football player. Come into the locker room after warming up for the game, and my legs feel like cinder blocks. My back is really tight. The focus just isn't there. We haven't won a game yet. It's week 5, and we have a little small huddle of players that come over around by my locker, in that kind of downtime that you have before you go out to take the field. And I'll never forget. Eugene Monroe walks up to me, sits by me at my locker, looks me dead in my eyes, and he says, "Hey, I have nothing for this game." And I just looked at him and kind of gave him a little smirk, a little giggle. And then Dwight Lowry, our secondary safety, he comes over, sits on the other side of me. He says, "Uche, I don't know, man. I ain't got it. I feel dead out there. In the warm-ups, I felt dead." And I'm just like, whoa, I'm not the only one, but damn, is it the whole team? So went out there. It was an ugly game. It was a slow game. It was a sluggish game. I felt like shit the entire time. But, that's just how the league is sometimes. And, you get those kind of coaches that kind of resort to those old mentality ways of coaching. And this was a guy who didn't, he never took his foot off the pedal. We were in full pads every week. We were hitting each other every week. It felt like we were in training camp the entire season. To me, that's no way to play football. So I ended up getting a concussion game before the second to last game of the season. And this was against New England, you'll figure. But got a concussion, came out of the game, didn't go back in, went and saw a third-party doctor the next day after, going and getting checked out by the team doctors, and come back to the facility on Wednesday, wearing a pair of shades because, that thing with the lights, you just can't really look at anything that has any artificial light. It really just sends you into a tailspin. But we had this situation where I walk into the training room, and the head of our trainers, our head trainer rather, Mike Ryan, walks up to me, gives me a little look, says, "Uche, gonna have to get you to pass that impact test. Maybe we get you to pass it by Thursday or Friday, right?" And I looked at this guy and I laughed. I said, "Dude, we're 3-12. I ain't playing." looked him dead in his eyes and told him, we're 3-12. There is no way in hell you are getting me out on that football field. Come hell or high water. Go tell the owner. Go tell the head coach. Go tell the GM. I'm not playing. Period. Which I wasn't lying to him. I wasn't playing. There was no way I was going to play in that game. We were playing against the Tennessee Titans at the end of the year with a 3-12 record with nothing to gain and, you know, no real reason that I would want to even consider risking myself and my health for the last game of the season in which there is no real reason to play. Now, I guess there was something to lose it for me because at that point I had gone 4 football seasons in a row without missing a game, 61 straight starts. So for what it's worth, my streak was broken, but something I can live with, that's for sure. Let's see some, let's look at some of these questions in the chat. Formerly Rodline. How do you keep motivated to put your body on the line when your team is flat out bad? Oh, well, that's what we just talked about. Yeah. And another one from formerly Rodline, 2 words, Da Bears next year. Yeah, it's always next year for you Chicagoans, huh? Always next year when it comes to sports. Look, maybe we just witnessed a turning point out in Chicago with Mitch Trubisky because, you know, the way he handed the Cowboys their ass, you know, that's enough to launch anybody into stardom. So we'll see how that plays out for him. But another thing I wanted to talk about is just kind of what's the process? How does the body handle the strain of an NFL season? How does the body handle the strain of thousands upon thousands of hits, bumps, bruises, aches, pains? How do you keep moving? I think it's important that you know people understand a little bit about what goes into getting ready for a football game. How do you get your body ready? What are the kind of issues that you have to deal with on a daily basis? And then once the season's over, how do you recover? Or once your career's over, how do you now maintain? You know, I've been retired now for 5 years, and I mean, there's pain every day. There's been pain every day of the week since I retired for 5 years. And a large part of managing that pain as a football player is getting in the training room, you know, getting in the training room, getting treatment, getting your body as recovered as possible in order to come out and play a game on Sunday. I mean, you look at a situation like Baker Mayfield, and I see we got a question here about that right now. Edmund S., I may have missed it, but what did you think about Baker calling out his training staff? So, the whole situation with Baker Mayfield, I think, is quite ridiculous. Him calling out the training staff. I mean, you just don't do that. Again, there are certain things that in the NFL, there are certain lines you don't cross, certain lines that you don't step over, because we're all here as professionals working, trying to make it through another day. And when Baker Mayfield comes out and criticizes the training staff, criticizes, you know, the work that those guys put in, you know, it really undercuts any kind of credibility that training staff may have with their players, because you wonder if they're slacking on you. You wonder if they're not paying attention to you. You wonder if they're not giving you your due in terms of helping you to recover from an injury, to maintain and control certain pains that you're dealing with. So, you know, I don't agree with it. I think it's, just another example of his immaturity as a player. I think it's another example of Baker Mayfield being a bit of a brat, a bit of a wuss, when you're diving in the end zone against the Bengals, the one-win Bengals, and, barking and screaming, that does nothing for your image as a player, not to any other players who have, any respect for themselves. So when you come out and you talk down on people who are trying to do their job, regardless of the circumstances, it's not your place to make that call. It's not your place to be the one who criticizes. Let that player that is dealing with his own injury, let him speak for himself. You don't got to speak for him. I think that's the problem with a lot of what Baker Mayfield's been doing this year, is that he just doesn't know how to shut his mouth, play ball, build up some rapport with the football world, with the football culture, show some respect to the game, and then it will show you respect back in return. He just doesn't understand that. And, I really feel like his career is not going to last, not going to be much more of a footnote than Money Manziel's was, because they're the same kind of personality. These young guys who get fed, who get spoon-fed compliments their entire college career, who haven't really had any real adversity to deal with. They come into a league of men. They get embarrassed. They whine. And then before you know it, they're gone. And I really think when you look at a situation like, Baker Mayfield, and I mean, we're getting a little bit off topic here, but, the guy just, he's just, right now for me, he's a flash in the pan. And he's a very faint flash at that. So kind of getting back to what I was talking about. And we got a super chat here from Norwegian Kryptonian. That is Norwegian $22. Release the Snyder Cut. For those of you who don't necessarily know about my geek side, I am a huge comic book fan. I am a huge video game fan. I love movies. I love Star Wars, and I love Zack Snyder's vision of the DCEU. And hence, I also salute that hashtag, release the Snyder Cut. So, but yeah, just kind of going back to what we were talking about, as a retired player, a guy who played in, 104 games in my career in the NFL. A lot of little bumps and bruises along the way, a lot of injuries, a lot of joints that are kind of off center, a lot of worn down ligaments and tendons, a couple of surgeries, and just generally a very battered and beaten body as a trench guy, as a guy who played in the trenches his entire football life. Just definitely have dealt with a lot of different issues. Maybe not different because they're issues I've dealt with also as a player, but were far less intrusive because of the level of technology you have around you, the level of expertise you have around you to help you maintain and treat a lot of those bumps and bruises and a lot of those injuries that you deal with as a football player, and I think there's a saying that a lot of people in football know, and maybe people outside of football as well know it. You're always playing hurt. You always play hurt. Every player in the NFL, every player in college football, every player who plays a football season, you're playing hurt after about 2 weeks. And what does that mean? That means you're playing with something that is aching. You're playing with something that is there. You're never 100%. You're never 100%. So there's times when, I wake up in the morning now, and I mean, I have to I got to hold on and pull myself out of bed because my back is so tight. I've got 2 herniated discs in my lower back, got a bulging disc in between every vertebrae. So, that's life, that's what we deal with. Fingers, wrists, knees, elbows, shoulders, neck, everything is beaten up a little bit. That's just kind of what it is. That's what we deal with. I went to Chicago in 2017. I flew out to Chicago and actually had a full body MRI done. Had a full body MRI done in Chicago, and got that report back about 4 or 5 days later. And to nobody's surprise, the body was completely jacked. The body was jacked all the way up. Yeah. Body was jacked up. It was about an 85-page report on my body. And I mean, they started from the shoulders, right shoulders, torn labrum, left shoulder, partially torn labrum, debris in the elbows, both of them, worn out tendons, ligaments in the elbows. It's funny. I played right guard the majority of my career in the NFL. So one thing that kept, rearing its head as a issue, from a balance standpoint of the body, was that my right side of my body was completely wrecked compared to the left side. So right shoulder, wrist, right knee, both ankles, lower back on the right side, everything is, flatlining. It's all broken down. It's all, hanging on. Left knee, brand new. That's pretty much it. Left knee was brand new. Everything else was still kind of jacked up. So, who am I kidding? This is what happened. This is what happens when you play football. You get broken up. So, I say that to kind of segue into another topic that I really, I saw this yesterday. And there was a New York Times article that features Jim Brown. I think that this relates directly into what I'm talking about here. Jim Brown, Hall of Fame running back, Cleveland Browns. When I was little, I thought that's why they were called the Browns, because it was Jim Brown who had been the face of that franchise throughout his career. So all right. So Jim Brown, this article to me really kind of hit me in my core, because it dials directly into what we've been talking about here. And it's in this article from the New York Times, op-ed from Jim Brown, is called "Jim Brown, Football Has Forgotten the Men Who Made It Great. While the league makes billions, many retired players are living on shockingly low pensions." Mr. Brown was a running back for the Cleveland Browns from 1957 to 1965. I think he needs no introduction, obviously, but cannot ignore this topic that is now, rearing its head once again. And the truth of the matter is that the NFL doesn't really care, and I'm going to go through this article very quickly, but I would like everybody to, kind of give this a little bit of attention for a moment, because I think it's important, because I think what Jim Brown's saying here is 100% true. I think that he is He has hit it directly, hit the nail directly on the head. And you see this football helmet, this old, battered football helmet that has grass going through it, scars everywhere. But the article says, turn on any NFL game on Sunday and you'll see the league celebrating its 100th season. Thunderous video montages and top 10 tight ends specials will exalt football's history with one clear, though unspoken message. The appeal and profitability of today's NFL derives as much from its past as its present. What the highlights won't show, however, is how many of the actual human beings in those grainy films, rank and file players from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s who helped make the league the $15 billion business it is today, are now, in old age, struggling to make ends meet. The reason is not that their salaries were in the thousands rather than the millions. It's that their pensions from the league are shockingly, immorally low. Let me give this thing, before we go any further, let me try and give this thing a full, let me zoom it in some so you guys can see it as well. All right. Most NFL players who retired before 1993 receive a pension of about $365 a month per season they played, meaning that the typical 7-year player gets about $2,500 a month. Thousands get considerably less and have stories you won't see on network broadcasts. One star of those New York Jets Super Bowl team videos now lives in a trailer, unable to afford a dentist. He barely has any teeth. A standout lineman from the storied 1970s Minnesota Vikings played 17 years and gets just $2,300 a month. He took some of his pension early. That's not enough to cover his football-related medical bills, leaving him and his wife living check to check. There are countless more like them. You know, and again, this kind of hits directly at home for a player like me because I'm retired. I'm a retired player. And, you know, since my retirement, you know, I've kept up with all those accounts, you know, checked on them. You know, I've had, you know, one of my old teammates, Eben Britton, has been on this Lineman Life podcast with me before. And me and Eben have talked about how unreliable the NFL Players Association is, how unreliable they are to the needs of retired players. And I think that a lot of that's being said right here with Jim Brown is still very true today. They don't give a damn. It's crazy how they don't give a damn. But it's also crazy how much fucking money they are making off of retired players' retirement accounts. So just to give you a little perspective, and I'll use myself as an example. The NFL has about $2 million that I've invested into my post-career savings with the NFL, about almost $2 million that I have no access to, that your everyday citizen, your everyday Joe working a 9-to-5 with those same kind of accounts has access to them at the drop of a dime because of the way that 401k laws work and the way that, you know, IRAs work. They have access to those accounts. NFL gives you zero access. The NFL doesn't even give you the actual paperwork to give you to give you a true understanding of what companies are holding these accounts. You have no idea because all you get from the NFL is an NFL booklet that has their summarized statement on it with no details and no account numbers to actually give you full transparency into where is your money. They do it for a reason. They do it so that they can make money off of the interest based on what they've also put into that account. Because the NFL does have, for instance, the NFL does have the best 401k plan out there. Nobody has a 401k plan like the NFL. The NFL matches everything you put in. So you put in the max. I think the max this year is 18,500. I might be off on that, but you put in 18,000. The NFL puts in 20,000. So the NFL is investing with you in your 401k. But the crazy side about it is that you have no access to that once you retire. You don't have any access to it, and you can, they obviously have online accounts you can look at from the NFLPA to give you, a summary once again of what you have. But if you call the NFLPA, if I called them right now and said, hey, I'd like to take out some of that money, no, they won't let you. And we're hoping that that's something that they address going into this next CBA. But let me continue and get through the rest of this article. Then we'll look at some questions in the chat. It says here, now, I'm not one of these players. I was fortunate to have second careers in marketing for PepsiCo and as an actor. But I know too many of these men and their families. They need a voice, one that can be heard over the highlights. This situation is easily fixed. The NFL and the Players Union are negotiating a labor agreement that will ultimately split up more than $100 billion, perhaps even $200 billion in revenue. The money for dignified pensions is there. In fact, according to Fairness for Athletes in Retirement, an advocacy group, less than 1% of the revenue from each side, the Players Union and the league, would more than double the current pensions for every pre-1993 player for the rest of their lives. And here's the crazy thing. I go on the NFLPA's website to look at my player benefits, and you know what my pension is? Once I turn 45, I start getting my pension. My pension is $3,400. $3,400 a month. We get 5 years of free medical health insurance, medical health care insurance from the moment we retire. And after that, you're on your own. For a league that's looking to split up almost $200 billion in revenue, you would think that they could give their retired players, guys who have dedicated their lives to the sport, not just to the NFL, but their entire life to the sport of football. You would think that these guys would have the wherewithal to give players like us some dignity and giving us health care to last us our entire lives, because we gave our entire life to this sport of football. We love the sport. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, look at the situation. Look at the situation that some of these players are in, living in trailers and getting $2,500 a month. Like I said, mine, which will be coming in 10 years, is at $3,400 a month. That's my pension. So at the end of the day, it's not much higher than what these guys are dealing with at $2,500. Says here, the question is whether the league and its players want to step up for the men on whose knees, shoulders, and brains, I think it is extraordinary that he says specifically brains, the NFL was built. Team owners should understand the urgency. They see old players, many of whom they cheered in childhood, on canes at fundraising events or in wheelchairs at Hall of Fame ceremonies. They know that films about the league's history and heavily sponsored 100 season specials will make a fortune for the teams. And they also know that almost none of the players featured in those videos will get a dime of it, which is also a disgrace. Today, paltry pensions are the last vestige of the one-sided labor rules in the league before 1993. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell has said, nothing the league can do can ever fully express our appreciation to the players who helped build our league. I believe he is sincere, but real appreciation would be an appropriate pension. Current players need more education about the history of their profession. They don't understand that their 7- and 8-figure salaries exist only because players from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, who are now in their 60s, 70s, and 80s themselves, risked and even sacrificed their careers to fight for basic employment rights that are now taken for granted. I think that's important. I think that's really important. You know, this is an amazing amount of insight coming from Jim Brown. And I think that this guy is dead on. I think every point he's making is on the mark. And I also think that, like I said before, there's not a ton of difference in today's situation for players once they're retired. Not a ton has changed. A lot has changed, but not where you would think it would be for a league that's making the kind of money that the NFL makes, right? Players of my generation and those who came after me fought to be represented by an agent, to get an independent medical opinion on injuries, and to receive severance pay. They had no 401k plans or the annuity plans that today give players a total of $2 million as a retirement safety net. Like I just said, thousands of players went on strike in 1982 and 1987 to pursue and eventually win free agency for future generations of players. Yet today, there's the sole retirement benefit for these pioneers is a pension check that is less than today's average player makes per snap. Wow. In football terms, today's players should remember their blockers. As a running back, woo-woo. Hey, I give him some straight up props for that. Yes, sir. Today's players should remember their blockers. Let that sink in. Remember their blockers. As a running back, I know that you get only as far as the men who take punishment and remove obstacles for you to run. The nameless linemen in highlight reels didn't block for just me and long ago stars like Franco Harris and Walter Payton. They blocked for current players too. The National Basketball Association understands this. The NBA has pensions that are 3 times the NFL's. And in 2017, the NBA and its players agreed that every player, whether from 1966, 2006, or 2019, would receive the same pension amount and free health insurance for life. And that is unbelievable. That is unbelievable. Oh, holy shit. The NBA, a league in which the sport is a physical sport, no doubt, but nowhere on the level as football. These guys get 3 times the pension. Everybody gets the same amount. And they all get free health insurance for life. That's crazy. Woo, that is crazy. Chris Paul, the Oklahoma City Thunder point guard who is president of the Basketball Players Association, put it this way. The game has never before been more popular, and all the players in our league today recognize that we're only in this position because of the hard work and dedication of the men who came before us. It's important that we take care of our entire extended NBA family. Unbelievable. Look at this. I mean, this is what the NBA is doing. NFL's not even close. NFL's not even close. We're not even close. That's crazy. Wow. Professional football is a wonderful sport, and I hope it's around forever, but the men who built it will not be. About 100 die every year, and many of them are struggling because their primary employer, one that is now awash in cash, chooses to give them barely any pension. When you watch the 100th season highlights packages, look for those blockers. The players may be remembered, but the men are forgotten. And that is from Jim Brown, a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame and the longtime running back of the Cleveland Browns. Most anyone who knows anything about football definitely knows about Jim Brown. And I applaud this op-ed by Jim Brown because, you know, and I think that, you know, it's fair for me to say this. I really think that it hasn't changed much today. I really do. I really think that the NFL and the NFLPA collude a lot together. They did it in the last CBA. We were all privy to see it, all of us players. They colluded. They paid guys like Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady. They paid these guys, from what I understand. I have no way of proving this, but from what I understand, in order to get that CBA pushed through and ratified, they paid guys like Drew Brees to basically pressure his teammates into signing and ratifying, or agreeing to ratify that CBA of 2010. So there's definitely a level of corruption in the NFLPA that is obvious to any players who have had to deal with them. You know, it doesn't make much sense that you don't have any control over your money with them, because it is, after all, your money. But that is a situation that a lot of players do find themselves in, just because, you know, the way it's presented to us when we're young players, the way it's presented to us as rookies, as, you know, second and third year players, are, hey, you know, the NFL has all these wonderful things that, you know, you need to take advantage of, help you save your money. And, you know, and that is the approach that all of us pretty much, you know, got in line to take, because we're young and we trust that this league has our best interests in mind, because without the players, there is no league. But, you know, they don't tell you about a lot of the fine print. They don't tell you that it's really just it's going to be just a number sheet that you get to look at, but you have absolutely no ability to control the way that it's invested past a certain point. You have no ability to roll it over into different accounts, investment power, and you have no access to it. If you have any kind of hardship or need that money, you have no access to it whatsoever until a certain age, which means you'd have to wait for a certain number of years to pass before you actually have any options at all in dealing with that money. But specifically speaking to the pension side, the pension situation is really not much has changed about that for even players, current players, even guys who are, you know, more recently retired like myself. Like, our pet pension is not even $1,000 more than what these guys from the 60s and 70s are getting. And we all know that, you know, in today's world, it's not going to be that simple for people to live off of a pension that, you know, is sitting at what, like mine is $3,500 a month. And that's for 7 years. That's from 7 years playing. So, you know, again, it boils down to the fact that the NFL just is not interested in sharing the billions that they make on a yearly basis with people who can't provide them with any return on their investments because they're retired. But our investments have already been put in full. So that's bullshit for the NFL to have guys who played in this era when there was no no pension, when there was no healthcare coverage, when there was no, you know, multi-million-dollar contracts, for these guys to be just left in the wind is sickening. It is sickening. So a lot of props there to the great Jim Brown in that op-ed that he wrote for the New York Times. Let's take a look at some of the questions here in the chat. Soki1, Hall of Famer Mike Webster died after living under a bridge. Earl Campbell, one of the most feared runners in history, just sits alone in a wheelchair until he's carted out for photo ops. Yeah, that's sad, isn't it? You know, that puts a lump in my throat just thinking about that, because, you know, these are guys who gave everything to the league because they love football. They didn't do it for the money. Yeah, we all get paid, but you know how much you know how much you got to deal with? You know how hard it is to deal with playing through an entire football season? You know how hard that is on your body? I mean, that's kind of the topic of today, is dealing with the pain, right? So these are guys who love the sport, who play the sport in a time when, from a fiscal standpoint, it may not have been the best job to have. It may not have been that dream job, but these guys were gladiators. These guys were superheroes to a certain extent. And, as players, as fans, how many of us dreamt of being a Jim Brown, dreamt of being a Michael Irvin, dreamt of being a Joe Namath, all these famous battle heavy warriors that we all know and love from their time as, as these rock stars, as these icons, and you see how a lot of them are being treated. You see how a lot of them suffer. And again, I'm privileged. I'll be the first one to admit it. I'm privileged to be in the position that I've been in my life, to be able to play in the NFL. The NFL has done a substantial amount for my life, but also on the flip side of that coin, the NFL has taken a lot from my life as well. The NFL has taken a lot from me physically. It's taken a lot mentally. It's taken a lot emotionally, because it is a rough sport. It is a sport that demands that you play through pain. It's a sport that demands that you deal with issues and you overcome them through perseverance. But it's not that simple. It's not always that simple. You have to actually be able to identify when you can't do it by yourself. You're conditioned to be a fearless, tireless, relentless warrior. And to some extent, that's not so compatible with the everyday life that you'll ensue upon once you retire. And I think most every player that's been in the league for any substantial amount of time, or played football for any substantial amount of time, can attest to the fact that, when it's all over with and the lights are off, there's a void there. There's a void. There is a there is a trauma to a certain extent. I've dealt with it. Every teammate that I've talked to has dealt with it. There is a level of depression that you deal with. There's a level of anxiety that you deal with. There's a level of irritability that you deal with. And it's hard to know whether or not you're dealing with, whether those are actual issues within you yourself, or if it's something more. And I think that's why the key point of Jim Brown mentioning the brain is such an important thing, because there are personality quirks that we all have, but when you play in our sport, and when you play, for the extended amount of time that we do, there is something to worry about in terms of what is going to happen with your brain. There are things about myself that I didn't really understand until I started thinking about it from that perspective. And obviously those are stories that I'll share all in due time. But I come to grips with myself that I probably 95% sure that I have CTE, just the same as 90% of all other, or 95%. I'm sorry, 99% of all NFL players who play. The New York Times also did a article that was based on a study out of the Boston, University of Boston, I think it was, or a study done from a university in the city of Boston, that directly circled around or centered around the case of CTE. And 100 brains were donated of former NFL players. Out of 100 brains from every position on the field, offense, defense, special teams, out of 100 brains, 99 had CTE. 99 brains out of 100. And guess which brain didn't have CTE? Guess. Kicker. Only person who doesn't have a brain injury is the kicker. Why? Because you can't hit the kickers. You can't hit them. Let's take a look at what you guys are saying here in the chat. Mark Wazowski, Jim Brown, one of the greatest running backs of all time, pissed me off so bad when they were attacking him a couple years ago over Trump. He was also in the Dirty Dozen. Yeah, I remember that. I remember he was in Mars Attacks as well. Yeah, Mars Attacks. Here we go. Pat says Jim Brown defended Earth when Mars attacked. He truly is a legend. Yeah, I agree 100%. This guy is a legend of the sport, you know, and he is an advocate for the players as well, which I think is a wonderful, beautiful thing. I think it's not talked about enough, the kind of work that he does with advocating for players. And, you know, me and Eben Britton have talked about this on numerous occasions as well. You know, the players need an advocacy group. We do. We need the people in our league and the people from the NFL Players Association to hear the voices of guys like Jim Brown and the people that played in his era. And that's something that will also, trickle over into players of the eras that came after them, like the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s. These are all time will continue to pass. And, these voices will still need to be heard because the NFL is a business. They're worried about their money, as they should be, but they're not. But they also should be worried about their players because they don't make any money without the players. No money without the players. So for me, I really feel like it is it's a blessing to be able to talk to my audience about these types of things, because 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to really talk about it because I didn't quite understand it. And, I went through things in my own life at those times that, really made me kind of step back and try and do a little bit more research and try and understand a little bit more about the situation, not only for just myself, but what is it, what is the sport done to, the players, what do we deal with after it's all done with? And one of my mentors in the league, offensive lineman by the name of Vince Manuwai, he passed away 1 year ago, November 4th. And Vinny was dealing with a lot of demons, and we all deal with our own demons in our own ways. But, Vinny was an amazing person. And, it was hard for people to really understand what was going on with him, because the way that we're trained, the way that we are conditioned psychologically, emotionally, it is to never show your cards. So, even me, myself, I had no idea that Vinny was going through a lot of the things he was going through, mainly because he had that joyful, happy, pleasant Hawaiian, island brother attitude when I would talk to him, on almost a weekly basis on the phone. I had no idea what he was dealing with. And he passed away of an overdose a year ago. And I think probably the last couple of times I talked to him, we went deeper into, what we dealt with as players and what we dealt with after we retired. And the guy was in a lot of pain. And I think that a lot that he was dealing with had to do with the fact that the game itself had damaged him to a certain extent. It had damaged him permanently. And I think that all comes back to the issue of CTE. So, look, I love football. He loved football. None of us hate football. None of us would ever choose anything else. If I had to go back and do it again, yeah, I'd still play football. I think that's fair. That's a fair assessment of most any player who's played at our level. We love the sport. There's nothing like the level of competition that you face in the NFL. But let's be real, the sport causes brain damage. That is the truth. That is an undeniable truth. What would you think? These are 22 of 22 players on a football field during the course of a game. These are all highly trained, highly aggressive, stronger, faster, smarter, tougher players than we've ever had, hitting each other at unbelievable bursts of speed. Of course they're going to have brain. Of course, we're all going to have brain damage. Of course, there's no way to change my mind on that. That's just the truth. The NFL has done enough to muddy up the perspective amongst the public. The NFL has done enough to push it to the side and keep it from taking over the headlines like it did back in 2013? Who was it? It was Dr. Benson Amale, Nigerian brother, Niger, who discovered CTE. But yeah, that's just the truth of the matter. That's what it does. But we still love the sport. We're just asking that the league, Jim Brown is asking that the league do what's right for its players. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that is something that is perfectly fine. Let's take a look here at the chat. Mike Jackson says, no money without player or fans. Fans and players are the power. That's 100% the truth there, Mike. Damn right. Formerly Rod Line, the public has a distorted view. They think every player is rolling in cash. They don't get how little older players were paid. That's true as well. I mean, and again, you got to think about it from a purely fiscal standpoint. You got players who are in the top bracket, the top tax bracket in the country. That's a 39% tax rate. So for a guy who they say makes $10 million a year, 39% plus Obamacare means they're paying 43% out of every check. You tell me how easy you think it would be. You tell me whether you would rather have 60% of your check, 70% of your check, or 80, 85% of your check. At the end of the day, we don't have a choice. We're giving up 43% of our check because you're playing football and you're making quote unquote millions. So the situation is very different when you really dig down into the numbers. But, at the end of the day, the CBA is being negotiated now. And when you have voices like Jim Brown, who are advocating for the player, then you can't ask for much more than that. Somebody who sees a need and who is going after the people at the top. And those people at the top have to listen because this guy's not somebody you can just ignore. He's a legend. He is a legend. So big props to Jim Brown on that. It's the holidays. The holidays, and Khalil Mack is paying off people's layaway bills. Khalil Mack, let me pull this up here. I think this is an interesting story. Khalil Mack pays off hometown Walmart's $80,000 holiday layaway bill. You know, we all know who Khalil Mack is. The Bears. That's the premier player at his position in the NFL. And Jim Brown says here, Khalil Mack. I'm sorry, I said Jim Brown. I meant Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack plays linebacker for the Chicago Bears, but he remains loyal to his hometown, Fort Pierce, Florida. Fort Pierce Walmart posted to its Facebook page Friday that Khalil Mack Foundation had paid off all active holiday layaway accounts at the store, totaling about $80,000. Says his foundation came to us and said he wanted to be a Secret Santa. So what better way to be a Secret Santa than to just go ahead and post that he just paid off everybody else's layaway bills totaling $80,000. He also donated cleats to Fort Pierce Westwood High in June. And it appears that Khalil is in that holiday spirit. He is just trying to do his part to help out people in his hometown community. I applaud that. I don't think we talk about that enough. I don't think we really give enough adherence to a lot of the things that athletes will do to help their communities, to help the cities that they play in during the course of the season and even in the off season. I know in Jacksonville, I did many years in a row. I did work with the Jacksonville Jaguars to take families out during Christmas holidays, take them out, take them to the stores, buy them stuff, fill up, I remember there was one time we actually did go into a Walmart. It was 9 of us. We went into a Walmart. We each grabbed a cart. We each grabbed a family and we said, hey, fill this cart up. Let's walk around. Let's fill up this cart. Bring your kids. Let's make sure you guys have the best Christmas possible this year. And people would be shocked, and look, I never really did it for the notoriety of it. I just always thought it was fun to see, I always thought it was fun to see what people like to buy when they know that they can get whatever they want. That's when you see people get really what they really desire, is when you tell them, hey, there's no budget here. Just get whatever the hell you want, anything you want. And I took a family around. It was a single mother. She had 3 kids with her. And there were some good kids. They were just really good kids who loved playing with toys, who loved video games, who loved, pushing each other around. And we walked up and down the aisles for about an hour and a half at Walmart. And I mean, I wish I still had the picture that I took with them. Their basket was just overflowed with toys, candy, movie, everything. And it was really awesome. So big shout out to Khalil Mack for paying off his hometown Walmart's layaway bill. That is what the spirit of the holidays is, and look, we go out there on Sundays and we battle each other, but we're all a brotherhood, and to see a guy do this kind of thing, it's cool, and that's not to just single him out, because this kind of thing happens all over the NFL. Players do this all throughout the year. We're all about helping when we can, because we know we are in a special place. We're in a special position as players to be in the position we are in as athletes. And we try to, pay that forward to people. And, we realize that not everybody is able to, afford some of the things that we've been able to spend money on without a second thought. So do what you can when you can and help people out. And that's something that I really respect coming out of Khalil Mack. So I think that's going to be where we call it a show today on Lineman Life. I really appreciate everybody being here to listen to me talk about the events of the NFL world, NFL culture. Once again, I am Uche Nwaneri, the observant lineman, aka Darth Slayer, aka Uche Windu. Really appreciate everybody for being in here. Thanks to the chat. You guys were great. And thanks to everybody who put in a super chat. Really appreciate that as well. Norwegian Kryptonian, really appreciate that. Hashtag release the Snyder cut. Yes, sir. We were on that as well. But yeah, this is what we're going to call it a podcast. Like I said, I'm going to try and get this podcast done each and every week, at least once a week. And also look out for me on primetimesportstalk.com, where they also upload my podcast and will link to my videos from my YouTube channel. Make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you get notified each and every time I have a podcast or have a video drop. I appreciate you guys joining me on this stream, and I will catch you all on the next one. Peace.